We are told, repeatedly, that America is the richest nation on earth, the land of opportunity, the shining city on a hill. And yet, there are zip codes in this country where the water is poison, it's been for years, where police response times stretch past an hour if they come at all, where homes sell for less than the price of a used Honda Civic, and nobody's buying. This isn't about foreign slums or distant war zones. This is about American towns where the infrastructure has collapsed so completely that residents live without basic sanitation, where violence has reached levels that would trigger international intervention if it happened. Anywhere else, where economic opportunity isn't just scarce, it's extinct. What does third world conditions mean in an American context? It means boil water advisories that last 4 years. It means entire neighborhoods bulldozed and left as empty fields. It means life expectancy rates that would embarrass developing nations. It means being forgotten systematically, institutionally, permanently. Today, we're counting down 10 American towns that have quietly slipped into this category. These are economic crime scenes, forgotten zip codes, the America the news won't show you. And let me be clear about something. This is not a shopping catalog for bargain hunters looking to flip houses. This is a warning. These cheap homes aren't opportunities, they're traps. Baited with desperation and sprung with property taxes, demolition orders, and broken promises. From severe decay to total collapse, these are the places America left behind. Let's begin. Number 10. Pine Bluff, Arkansas. On Zillow right now, you can find homes in Pine Bluff listed for $12,000. Some dip below $8,000. A quick search reveals dozens of properties under $20,000, 3-bedroom houses, historic craftsman-style homes, properties that would cost $500,000 in any functioning city. The median home value hovers around $70,000, but that number is misleading. The real story is in the foreclosure listings, where homes trade hands for the price of a decent bedroom set. Pine Bluff has consistently ranked as one of the most dangerous cities per capita in America. We're talking violent crime rates that exceed 1,000 incidents per 100,000 residents, roughly 5 times the national average. The FBI's Uniform Crime Report has repeatedly flagged the city, but it's not just crime. The poverty rate exceeds 28%. The population has collapsed from over 57,000 in 1980 to barely 40,000 today. When a quarter of your residents vanish over for decades, what remains isn't a community, it's an evacuation zone in slow motion. Drive through Pine Bluff's residential neighborhoods and you'll see it immediately. Boarded up windows, overgrown lots where homes used to stand. Entire blocks where abandonment has become the dominant architectural style. The downtown, once bustling with commerce, now features more empty storefronts than operating businesses. Historic buildings with gorgeous bones sit rotting, their windows dark, their futures uncertain. There's a heaviness here, a visual weight that tells you something went deeply, profoundly wrong. So why can you buy a house for $12,000 in Pine Bluff? Because nobody wants to live there badly enough to pay more. Those cheap homes often come with decades of deferred maintenance, meaning your $12,000 purchase could easily require $50,000 in repairs. Property taxes, while not astronomical, become crushing when your home's value never appreciates. Insurance rates are through the roof because of the crime statistics. And here's the real kicker: you can buy a cheap house, but you can't buy a safe neighborhood, a functioning economy, or a future for your children. Those aren't for sale at any price in Pine Bluff. Pine Bluff isn't a diamond in the rough. It's a warning shot, an early indicator of what happens when industry leaves, crime fills the void, and an entire city becomes collateral damage in America's economic restructuring. That $12,000 house is cheap because it's located in a place where the American dream went to die. You're not buying a home, you're buying a front row seat to municipal collapse. Number 9. Flint, Michigan. You've heard of Flint, everyone has. What you might not know is that you can still buy a house here for $15,000 or less. The Flint water crisis began in 2014 when the city switched its water source to the Flint River without proper corrosion control. Lead leached into the drinking water. Children were poisoned, and nearly a decade later, trust has not been restored. While officials claim the water now meets federal standards, residents still rely on bottled water. The trauma is generational. Beyond the water, Flint's violent crime rate remains more than triple the national average. The poverty rate exceeds 30%. Whole neighborhoods have been systematically demolished, leaving empty lots where families once lived. Driving through Flint feels like touring a war zone where the battle ended years ago, but nobody came to rebuild. Vast stretches of empty landmark where homes were bulldozed. The remaining structures often show signs of severe neglect: peeling paint, collapsing porches, windows covered with plywood. Factories that once employed tens of thousands now stand as rusting monuments to industrial abandonment. General Motors, which built the city, largely abandoned it. What remains is a landscape of loss. That $15,000 house in Flint comes with invisible costs. The water infrastructure, while officially fixed, remains a source of deep community distrust. Many homeowners still purchase bottled water, adding hundreds of dollars in annual costs. Insurance is expensive. Property taxes, calculated on older assessments, can sometimes exceed the actual value of the home, and good luck selling. The market is flooded with cheap properties because everyone who can leave has left. You ray not buying into a recovering city, you ray buying into a place that America used as a case study in governmental failure and then forgot. Flint represents something more insidious than simple economic decline. This is what happens when the government actively poisons its citizens and then expects them to simply move on. The cheap homes aren't bargains. They ray artifacts of betrayal, monuments to a breach of public trust, so profound that the city may never fully recover. The water might test clean now. The trauma never will. Number 8. Selma, Alabama. Selma, Alabama, a city whose name is synonymous with the civil rights movement, is home selling for under $20,000. The median home value barely cracks $60,000. Drive through certain neighborhoods and you'll find properties listed at $10,000, $8,000, even $5,000 for structures that technically still stand. In a city that changed American history, real estate has become almost worthless. Selma's poverty rate hovers around 35%, more than triple the national average. The median household income is roughly $22,000 per year. The infrastructure is crumbling. Streets are riddled with potholes, water systems are aging, and whole sections of the city lack adequate services. The population has fallen from over 28,000 in 1980 to approximately 17,000 today. Healthcare access is severely limited. The city lost its hospital in 2020, forcing residents to travel significant distances for emergency care. For a city that helped birth voting rights in America, the irony of its current disenfranchisement from services, from opportunity, from basic infrastructure is almost unbearable. Walking through downtown Selma is a study in contrasts. The Edmund Pettus Bridge stands as a monument to courage, drawing tourists who come to honor history. But venture beyond the historic sites and you'll find block after block of abandoned storefronts. Their windows dark, their signs faded. Residential neighborhoods show decades of disinvestment, porches sagging, roofs caving, yards overgrown. Beautiful historic homes, potentially architectural treasures, sit vacant and rotting. The visual message is clear. America remembers Selma's past but has forgotten its present. That $10,000 house in Selma seems like a steal until you realize what you're actually buying into: a city without a hospital, a tax base so eroded that basic services are perpetually underfunded, an economy with virtually no job opportunities beyond low-wage service work. The historic significance doesn't pay the bills. Those cheap homes often require extensive repairs, and finding contractors willing to work in areas with such limited economic activity can be challenging. You might own a piece of history, but you'll be living in a place that history seems to have left behind. Selma represents America's most shameful paradox: a city that sacrificed blood for this nation's ideals, only to be abandoned by the nation it helped perfect. The cheap real estate isn't an opportunity, it's an indictment. Every $10,000 house is a monument to broken promises and systemic neglect. We built museums to honor what happened on that bridge, then let the city around it crumble. That's not irony, that's betrayal. Number 7. Youngstown, Ohio. In Youngstown, entire houses sell for less than the appliances inside them. The median home value is around $45,000, but that number obscures the real picture. Search the listings and you'll find properties for $8,000, $5,000, even $1,000. Yes, $1,000 for a structure that once housed steel worker families living middle-class lives. The collapse is nearly complete. Youngstown has lost over 60% of its population since its peak in 1960, from 170,000 residents to barely 60,000 today. When steel left, everything left. The poverty rate exceeds 35%. Violent crime rates are roughly 3 times the national average. Thousands of homes have been abandoned, and many have been stripped of anything valuable: copper wiring, aluminum siding, fixtures. The city has demolished over 5,000 structures in recent years, but thousands more await the same fate. Basic services are stretched thin. Fire departments are understaffed. Police response times are delayed. Youngstown looks like a city that was evacuated. Block after block features abandoned homes, their windows broken, their yards swallowed by vegetation. Former steel mills rise like rusted cathedrals to a dead religion. Empty lots mark where homes were demolished, creating strange gaps in the urban fabric. In some neighborhoods, you can stand on a street corner and see more abandoned structures than occupied ones. Nature is reclaiming what industry: abandoned trees growing through factory floors, vines swallowing porches. It's hauntingly beautiful and deeply disturbing. Here's why those houses sell for $1. They're worthless. Often they've been stripped of copper, meaning the electrical system must be completely replaced. Plumbing has frequently been damaged by freezing or neglect. The structure itself may be compromised. And even if you rehabilitate a house, you're now the proud owner of property in a neighborhood where your neighbors are abandoned buildings, and your property value will likely never recover. The taxes may be minimal, but so is the chance of appreciation. You're not buying an asset, you're buying a liability with walls. Youngstown is what happens when an entire city's economic purpose evaporates overnight. The cheap houses are remnants of lives interrupted, families who fled, dreams that collapsed, a middle class that simply ceased to exist. That $5,000 house isn't cheap because of market fluctuation. It's cheap because the market has declared this place worthless. And markets, in their cold efficiency, are rarely wrong about such things. Number 6. McDowell County, West Virginia. In McDowell County, you can buy property for almost nothing. Homes list for $10,000, $5,000, sometimes less. The median home value hovers around $25,000 in a nation where that barely covers a kitchen renovation. Land that once powered America's Industrial Revolution now sells for what urbanites spent on a vacation. McDowell County has a life expectancy of approximately 64 years, lower than Bangladesh, lower than North Korea, lower than most developing nations. This isn't hyperbole. This is CDC data. Driving through McDowell County is driving through a landscape of loss. Abandoned coal camps dot the hollows, rows of identical houses built for miners, now empty and collapsing. Main streets in towns like Welch and Moore feature more closed storefronts than open ones. The mountains, beautiful in their severity, have become walls that trap rather than protect. Former company stores stand empty. Churches struggle to maintain their structures. Mobile homes, often in poor repair, have replaced the housing infrastructure that once existed. It's rural poverty of a depth most Americans cannot comprehend. Why is land so cheap in McDowell County? Because survival here is genuinely difficult without reliable cell service. You can't work remotely without broadband. You're isolated from the modern economy without a nearby hospital. A health emergency becomes life-threatening. The cheap property comes with expensive realities. Heating costs are significant. Transportation is essential, and services taken for granted elsewhere simply don't exist. You might buy a house for $8,000, but you'll spend thousands annually just maintaining access to basic civilization. McDowell County isn't failed urban policy, it's failed rural America laid bare. These mountains once produced the coal that built the nation's cities, powered its factories, and won its wars. Now, the people who remain in those hollows live shorter lives than citizens of countries we consider underdeveloped. The cheap land is a monument to extraction. We took what these mountains offered and left the residents to die with lower life expectancies than literal war zones. This isn't decay. This is abandonmentist policy. Number 5. Gary, Indiana. Gary, Indiana is perhaps the most famous example of urban collapse in America. Gary has lost over 75% of its peak population, from nearly 180,000 in 1960 to fewer than 70,000 today. The poverty rate exceeds 30%. Violent crime rates are among the highest in the nation. with murder rates that would constitute a humanitarian crisis in any other context. An estimated 30% of structures are abandoned. Entire neighborhoods have been essentially depopulated. The city struggles to provide basic services. Streetlights don't work in some areas. Roads remain unrepaired and emergency response times are severely delayed. The city is flirted with bankruptcy and state takeover. What was once a symbol of American industrial might has become a symbol of American industrial abandonment. Driving through Gary is like driving through a post-apocalyptic film set. The Methodist Church, a Gothic masterpiece, sits abandoned, its windows shattered, its interior exposed to the elements, trees growing from its roof. The Palace Theater, once ornate and grand, is a crumbling shell. Block after block features houses in various states of collapse. Former schools, former stores, former factories, all abandoned, all deteriorating. Vegetation consumes structures. Roofs cave in. The landscape creates an eerie beauty that photographers prize and residents endure. This is what it looks like when a city dies in slow motion. That $5,000 house in Gary comes with cost no listing. Mentions property taxes based on outdated assessments can exceed the home's actual value. Insurance companies either refuse coverage or charge premium rates. And then there's the neighborhood. Your $5,000 investment sits among hundreds of abandoned structures, any of which could catch fire and spread to your property. The city lacks resources for adequate demolition. Crime rates mean constant vigilance. Even if you renovate beautifully, your home's value depends on a neighborhood that doesn't exist anymore. You're not building equity. You're building into a void. Gary is the American industrial apocalypse made visible. U.S. Steel built the city, extracted its value, and left. The workers who built American prosperity were discarded when their labor was no longer needed. Those $5,000 houses are monuments to a social contract that was unilaterally terminated. The factories are gone, the people remain living among the ruins, waiting for a recovery that isn't coming. This isn't just economic decline. This is economic violence. Number 4. Jackson, Mississippi. In Jackson, Mississippi, the state capital, you can find homes for $20,000 or less. The median home value sits around $85,000. But distressed properties flood the market at far lower prices. Jackson's water system has become nationally infamous for its failures. In 2022, the system collapsed entirely, leaving 150,000 residents without water to drink, cook, or flush toilets for weeks. This wasn't a sudden disaster. The infrastructure had been failing for years. Boil water notices had become routine. Pipes, some dating back a century, regularly burst. The city lacks the tax base to fund repairs, the state has largely refused assistance, and residents have been left to cope with third-world conditions in a first-world capital. Beyond water, violent crime rates are staggering. Jackson consistently ranks among the most dangerous cities per capita in America. The poverty rate exceeds 25%. Population has declined as those who can leave have left. Jackson presents two faces. There are pockets of prosperity to Fonner and Bellhaven where homes are maintained and businesses thrive. But venture into South Jackson, West Jackson, and you enter different territory entirely. Abandoned houses and businesses dot the landscape. Infrastructure visibly crumbles, roads potholed, bridges aging, water mains rupturing. During the water crisis, residents line up for hours to fill containers with non-potable water for flushing. National Guard trucks distributed drinking water like a disaster zone because that's exactly what this is. A slow-motion disaster that America refuses to acknowledge. Why is that house $15,000? Because it's connected to a water system that may or may not function. Because police response times in certain neighborhoods stretch beyond an hour. Because the tax base is eroding and services are declining. Because when the infrastructure failed, the message was clear: you're on your own. Those cheap homes come with uncertainty as a permanent feature. Will there be water pressure tomorrow? Will the boil notice ever end? Will the crime rate improve? Nobody knows. You're not buying stability. You're buying exposure to systemic failure. Jackson represents something uniquely damning: a state capital abandoned by its own state. Mississippi's majority white legislature has systematically underfunded this majority black city. The water crisis wasn't a natural disaster. It was manufactured through decades of disinvestment. Those $15,000 houses sit in a city that cannot guarantee water, the most basic utility. This isn't just failure. This is what happens when a city becomes disposable in the eyes of those with power to help. Number 3. East Street, Lewis, Illinois and East St. Louis. Homes don't really sell, they're abandoned. Properties can be acquired for four figures or less. Median home values hover around $40,000, but that number is almost meaningless. Tax lien auctions move properties for hundreds of dollars. Some homes are essentially free if you're willing to take on the liability. In this city, real estate is negative value. East St. Louis has a violent crime rate more than 5 times the national average. At its peak, the city's murder rate rivaled active war zones. The poverty rate exceeds 40%. Population has collapsed from over 80,000 in 1970 to fewer than 20,000 today, a 75% decline. Entire city blocks have been demolished or simply collapsed. Basic services are skeletal. Streetlights don't work in many areas. Fire response is limited. The tax base is so decimated that the city has struggled to maintain basic functions. For decades, East St. Louis has represented the extreme edge of American urban decay, a place where municipal government itself has essentially failed. Driving through East St. Louis is genuinely disorienting. Entire blocks have vanished, not abandoned, vanished. Where there should be houses, there are empty lots. Where there should be businesses, there is nothing. Former commercial districts look like they were evacuated during a war. The casino on the riverfront creates a strange contrast, its lights and prosperity standing against a backdrop of profound decay. Homes that remain often show severe neglect. Buildings lean at dangerous angles. Streets in some areas are barely passable. This is an urban blight. This is urban erasure. Here's the ugly truth. Many properties in East St. Louis are essentially uninhabitable. The cheap price reflects the cost of demolition, back taxes, and liability that any buyer inherits. If you buy a $2,000 house, you might immediately owe $5,000 in back taxes and face a $15,000 demolition order. The numbers don't work because they're not supposed to. This real estate exists only on paper. Meanwhile, insurance is either unavailable or prohibitively expensive. Crime rates mean constant personal risk, and economic opportunity is essentially zero. There's no recovery path because there's nothing left to recover. East St. Louis is what happens when a city is abandoned so completely that it stops functioning as a city. This is beyond decay. This is what comes after decay. The homes aren't cheap because the market is down. They're cheap because the market has determined this land, these structures, this entire community has no economic value. Every abandoned lot represents a family that left, a business that closed, a future that died. This isn't a real estate opportunity. This is a mass grave of American dreams. Number 2. Centralia, Pennsylvania. In Centralia, Pennsylvania, you can buy land for almost nothing. Property transfers happen for token amounts. But here's the distinction that matters. This isn't cheap real estate, this is condemned real estate. You can technically own land in Centralia, but you cannot safely live there. The price reflects this fundamental truth. Centralia sits above a coal mine fire that has been burning since 1962. That has over 6 decades of underground combustion. The fire releases toxic gases, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide through cracks in the ground. Sinkholes open without warning. Ground temperatures reach 900 degrees Fahrenheit in some areas. Steam vents from fissures in the earth. The government condemned the town, bought out most residents, and officially revoked its zip code in 2002. Fewer than 10 people remain, mostly elderly holdouts who refused relocation. This isn't a failed city. This is a city that is literally on fire, slowly consuming itself from below. Driving into Centralia is surreal. Streets exist with no houses, just pavement running through empty lots where homes once stood. Route 61, the old main road, is closed and cracked with steam rising from fissures in the asphalt. Graffiti covers the abandoned highway section, making it a strange tourist attraction. The landscape feels post-apocalyptic because it essentially is. This is what happens when the ground itself becomes uninhabitable. Smoke rises from the earth. The few remaining structures sit in eerie isolation. The cemetery remains maintained, while everything else has been erased. It's hauntingly quiet, and the silence carries the weight of a community that was literally swallowed by fire. Why can you get land nearly free in Centralia? Because it's trying to kill you. The underground fire continues spreading and is projected to burn for another 150 years at minimum. The toxic gases are real and ongoing. Sinkholes can open beneath your feet. Even if you built a structure, you couldn't get insurance. You couldn't get utilities, you couldn't get emergency services. The land is cheap because it is uninhabitable. A lesson in what happens when an entire community is sacrificed to industrial consequences nobody wanted to address until it was too late. Centralia is unique on this list because the problem isn't economics or crime, it's literal environmental catastrophe. The underground fire is a physical manifestation of industrial neglect, and the government's response was simply to erase the town rather than fight the fire. Those few remaining residents live above a burning coal seam because they refuse to abandon their homes. The cheap land isn't an opportunity, it's a warning. Some places aren't abandoned because people left. Some places are abandoned because the ground itself became hostile to human life. Number 1. CAIRO, Illinois. In CAIRO, Illinois, pronounced CAIRO by locals, you can find habitable houses for $15,000 or less. But that's if you can find a habitable house at all. Most structures in CAIRO are shells. The median home value has essentially lost meaning in a place where more buildings are abandoned than occupied. Properties sell at tax auctions for hundreds of dollars. Real estate here isn't cheap, it's nearly worthless. CAIRO was once a thriving river city of 15,000 people, strategically located at the confluence of the Mississippi and Ohio rivers. Today, fewer than 1,800 residents remain in 88% population collapse. The poverty rate exceeds 50%. Unemployment is rampant. The historic downtown is largely abandoned, with building after building standing empty and deteriorating. Basic services are minimal. The housing authority was dissolved after years of neglect left public housing uninhabitable. The city government barely functions. There is no grocery store, no hospital, limited law enforcement. CAIRO exists in a state of suspended collapse, not quite dead, not quite alive. CAIRO looks like a ghost town because it essentially is one, Grand Victorian and Italianate. Buildings line downtown streets, their architectural beauty evident even through decades of decay. Windows are broken or boarded. Roofs have collapsed. Vegetation grows through foundations. The Gem Theater, once ornate and proud, sits abandoned like so many others. Residential streets feature house after house in various stages of collapse, some maintained by the few remaining residents, most left to rot. The city's marina sits largely empty. The riverfront, once a source of prosperity, has become irrelevant. Driving through CAIRO is like visiting a place that history simply forgot to finish killing. That $10,000 house in CAIRO requires understanding what you're actually buying. You're buying a structure in a city with virtually no economy, no services, no future. That house probably needs $50, zero, or more in repairs. There's no contractor base because there's no economy. There's no resale market because there's no one to sell to. Insurance is difficult or impossible to obtain. And even if you restore a beautiful Victorian home, you'll be living in a city that cannot guarantee basic municipal services, surrounded by abandonment that spreads further each year. This isn't investment. This is preservation archaeology. CAIRO is the ghost city, the ultimate expression of American municipal collapse. Once prosperous, once significant, now reduced to a handful of residents maintaining a death watch over their hometown. The cheap properties aren't opportunities, they're epitaphs. Every abandoned building represents a family that left, a business that closed, a future that was withdrawn like funding from a failed project. CAIRO didn't fail suddenly. It failed slowly, visibly, and nobody intervened. The $15,000 house exists because America decided the city wasn't worth saving. That's not a real estate opportunity. That's a national shame with a for sale sign. We've just traveled through 10 American places that exist outside the America. We're shown on television, in political speeches, or in tourism advertisements. These are places where the infrastructure has failed, the economy has collapsed, the population has fled, and those who remain are left to survive in conditions that rival developing nations. How did this happen? The answer is uncomfortable. We let it happen. These cities didn't fail randomly. They failed because industry left and nothing replaced it. They failed because state and federal governments withdrew support. They failed because the people who lived there lacked the political power to demand otherwise. They failed because, in the cold calculus of American capitalism, these places became worthless. And here's the warning no one wants to hear. This decay is spreading. The conditions we've documented today aren't contained. Every year, more cities edge toward these cliffs. More infrastructure crumbles. More communities are abandoned. Those $15,000 houses aren't bargains. They're evidence of a country that preaches prosperity while abandoning its most vulnerable communities. Evidence that the richest nation on earth has places where the water is poison. And the American dream is a cruel joke. This is the America the news won't show you.